I was still unconscious from surgery when my mother-in-law leaned in and said, "If she dies, leave the kid. He's not our blood." And my husband looked the doctor straight in the eye and said, "Just sign the papers." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I didn't even know if I'd wake up. But when I did, my 10-year-old son was sitting next to my bed, holding a microphone in both hands like it was the most important thing in the world. He looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, I recorded what they said to the doctor while you were asleep." That moment changed everything. My name is Lena. I'm 32 years old, and until last year, I was a middle school teacher in Asheville, North Carolina. I taught English, mostly to sixth graders. I loved it. I loved their curiosity, their questions, even their awkward silences. Teaching felt like purpose. Then my body started turning on me. I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease after collapsing in the hallway between classes. It started slow, fatigue, headaches, but by the end of the semester, I couldn't lift my arms without pain. I had to quit my job. At home, things were harder than I expected. My husband, Bryce, had always been calm under pressure, the steady one. He worked in corporate law, always dressed sharp, always in control. But when I got sick, something changed. He started coming home later, talking less, checking out emotionally. He'd say things like, "Just focus on getting better." But his eyes never really met mine anymore. I started to feel like I was fading from my own life, like I was slowly becoming invisible in my own home. The only person who never stopped seeing me was my son, Milo. He's 10, sharp as a whip, always asking questions. He's the kind of kid who'll stop to hold the door for someone and then ask you 3 follow-up questions about your shoes. He's kind and curious and stubborn, just like me. He started recording things last year with this toy microphone he got for his birthday. He said he wanted to be a podcaster when he grew up. He recorded bedtime stories, car rides, conversations. I used to tease him that he was building a time capsule of our lives. Then there's Celia, my mother-in-law. She never liked me. From the beginning, she made it clear that I wasn't who she had pictured for her son. She grew up in a small town in Georgia where tradition was everything. She once told me I wasn't soft enough, that I talked too much, thought too much, asked too many questions. When Milo was born, she didn't come to the hospital. She sent flowers. I thought maybe she'd soften over time. She didn't. She kept her distance, but whenever she showed up, it was clear she was just waiting for me to mess up. When my health got worse, she came around more often. Not to help, but to watch. She'd show up with home-cooked food, but criticize how I kept the house. She once asked if I'd ever considered how unfair it was to raise a child while being so unstable. She said it like a diagnosis, like she was just stating facts. The surgery was supposed to be a chance. The doctors said it wasn't a cure, but it might give me some control over my symptoms. I was scared, but I said yes. Not because I trusted the odds, but because I couldn't keep watching Milo watch me get worse. He'd ask questions I couldn't answer. "Are you getting better, Mom? Will you be okay by summer?" I needed to try for him. Bryce was quiet the morning of the surgery. He drove me to the hospital in silence, checking his phone at every red light. When we arrived, I reached for his hand and he let me hold it, but he didn't squeeze back. Milo came too. He insisted. He packed his microphone in his backpack. "In case I need to tell the story later," he said. I smiled and told him I'd be back before he knew it. They prepped me for surgery. The lights were cold. I could hear the beep of machines and nurses' shoes moving across tile. I looked at Milo. He looked so small in that chair. I reached out and he took my hand with both of his. He said, "I'll be right here, Mom." I told him I loved him and that I'd see him soon. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I felt safe for a very long time. I don't remember much from the surgery itself. I remember the cold, the smell of antiseptic, a nurse brushing hair out of my eyes and telling me it would be over soon. Then blackness, heavy and deep. They said I was under for almost 6 hours. It was supposed to be 4, but there were complications. My blood pressure crashed. I lost more blood than expected. The doctors had to make decisions fast. But that part came later. What matters is what happened in the waiting room, while I was unconscious on an operating table, fighting to stay alive. Milo had been left in the hospital family lounge with his backpack and a tablet. Bryce and Celia were asked to wait in the hallway outside the operating suite. According to Milo, they thought he had fallen asleep, but he hadn't. He was sitting in the corner with his headphones off, holding his microphone like he always did. He had placed it on the table to record what he thought would be quiet background noise. He liked to play the hospital sounds back later, call it real-world audio. That was all it was meant to be. Instead, what he caught was a conversation that should have never happened. I didn't hear the recording myself until later, but when Milo played it for me, I couldn't breathe. The voice was Celia's first, clear, sharp, like ice. "She's not getting better, Bryce. You know that. The girl's been dragging you down for years. If she dies on that table, you need to think about your future. You're still young. You can start over. But dragging that boy around, he's not even your blood." That was when I stopped the recording the first time. Milo looked up at me, his eyes wide. He said, "There's more, Mom." I told him I needed to hear it all. Then Bryce's voice, lower, flatter, like he was talking about a meeting at work. "I know. I'll sign whatever they need. She wouldn't want to live like that anyway." "You're doing the right thing," Celia said. Then it clicked. They weren't just giving up on me. They were ready to erase me. Bryce had signed a DNR, do not resuscitate, order, without my consent, without telling me, without even speaking to the doctor about my actual wishes. I had never signed one, never even discussed it, but they didn't care. They assumed I wouldn't make it, and instead of praying I'd pull through or sitting at my bedside, they were already making plans for a life without me. And Milo was sitting 10 feet away recording it all. He told me later that something about the way they whispered made him feel sick. He didn't understand every word, but he understood the tone. He said it sounded like they were deciding something they had no right to decide. I survived that surgery. Somehow, despite the odds, I made it through. When I woke up, the room was spinning and my body was on fire. A nurse was checking my IV line. I could barely talk, but I asked, "What happened?" She paused and said, "You had a hard time, but you pulled through. There was a DNR on file, but your vitals stabilized before it became an issue." The words hit me like a slap. A DNR. I hadn't signed anything. Milo was there. He was sitting beside my bed with his backpack in his lap. His face looked tired and scared, but also calm, like he'd been holding something in for too long. "Mom," he said, "I need to tell you something. I recorded what Dad and Grandma said when you were asleep." He pulled out his little microphone and pressed play. I listened, not just to the words, but to the coldness in them, the finality, the casual way my life had been discussed, like a burden to be crossed off. I could feel my heart racing, my throat tightening, but I didn't cry, not then. That moment stripped away everything I thought I could count on. My marriage, my safety, the idea that someone I loved would fight for me if I couldn't fight for myself. The people I had trusted the most had chosen convenience over compassion. I had almost died, and they were ready for it. But Milo wasn't. He didn't understand everything, but he knew enough, and he held on to the truth like it was a lifeline, because it was. I lay there in the hospital bed listening to that recording play through my son's tiny speaker, and everything I thought I understood about my life cracked open. When it ended, Milo looked up at me and said, "I didn't mean to spy. I just wanted to record the hospital sounds, but I think they were talking about you dying." I didn't know what to say. I was still connected to 3 IVs and wearing a heart monitor, but inside I felt colder than I ever had before. My husband, my legal next of kin, had signed a DNR for me behind my back. His mother, who had always treated me like I didn't belong, was the one pushing him to do it. And if I hadn't pulled through the surgery, that one signature would have been the end of my story. I asked Milo to hand me the recorder. I replayed the conversation twice. The second time, I listened as a mother, and something inside me ignited. It wasn't just betrayal, it was survival. Someone had tried to take my future from me, and the only reason I was still here was because my son was smart enough, brave enough to listen when others would have looked away. I pressed the nurse call button. A woman named Angela came in. She had kind eyes and looked exhausted, like someone who had spent a long night on her feet. I told her I needed to speak with the attending physician and a patient advocate. She asked if I was in pain. I said, "Not the kind you can treat with medicine." She came back 10 minutes later with Dr. Harris, the surgeon who'd operated on me, and a hospital administrator. I asked them to sit down. I told them I had never signed a DNR. They looked at each other like they already knew something was wrong. I held up the recorder and said, "I think you need to hear what was said in your waiting room while I was unconscious." I played the clip for them. The room went silent. No one interrupted. Dr. Harris leaned forward, his expression hardening with each word. When it ended, he looked directly at the administrator and said, "I want this reviewed immediately. This is a serious ethical breach." The administrator took the device from me and said they would need to make a copy for hospital records. I said I would be making my own copy first. He didn't argue. When they left, I turned to Milo. He had been quiet the whole time, sitting on the edge of the chair like he didn't know if he was in trouble or not. I took his hand and said, "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." He nodded and looked away. "Are you going to be okay?" I told him I would be. But first, I had to make some decisions. Later that day, when I was strong enough to sit up, I used the hospital's computer to pull up my medical records. There it was in black and white, a DNR order filed 2 days before the surgery, signed electronically by Bryce. I printed it. Then I called my lawyer. We had worked together before, back when Bryce and I bought our first house. She knew me well enough to know I wasn't someone who made threats. Told her everything. The secret DNR, the recording, the plan to walk away with Milo if I died. She didn't hesitate. "Do you want to move forward with divorce and full custody?" "Yes," I said, "immediately." Bryce didn't come to the hospital that day, or the next. Celia didn't call. There were no flowers, no texts, no concern. I think they were waiting for the dust to settle. But I wasn't going to wait. The hospital launched an internal investigation. I gave them the full recording. They confirmed the DNR was unauthorized and illegal. They apologized formally and said new procedures would be put in place to prevent something like this from happening again. I didn't cry during any of it. I felt like my heart had hardened into something unbreakable. But Milo's hand in mine reminded me I wasn't alone. He had protected me in the one way he knew how. He had listened. He had acted. In a world where grown adults had betrayed me, my 10-year-old son had saved my life, and I was ready now, ready to protect him, ready to protect myself. The day I was discharged from the hospital, I didn't go home. I walked out with my discharge papers in one hand and Milo's fingers wrapped tightly around the other. My lawyer had already filed for emergency custody and a protective order. We were checked into a short-term rental by that evening. It was a quiet apartment across town, just a one-bedroom with a fold-out couch, but it felt like a new world, not because it was beautiful, but because I was free. Milo and I were out of their reach. The hospital had finished its investigation. They confirmed what I already knew. The DNR was forged. Bryce had used his legal background to access the patient portal and submit the order under my name. His credentials were suspended by the hospital, and the matter was forwarded to the state board. That could have been the end of it. I could have let the legal process play out. I could have waited and watched him lose his license and reputation quietly. But I didn't want quiet. The night before the court hearing, Milo sat on the edge of the bed with his microphone in hand. He looked at me and said, "Can I play it one more time?" I nodded. He pressed play, and once again we heard Celia's voice. "If she dies, leave the kid. He's not our blood." Then Bryce, "I know. I'll sign. It's just easier this way." Milo stopped the recording halfway through this time. He looked up and said, "I think I want people to hear it, not just the court, everyone." I asked him what he meant. He said he wanted to post it on his podcast feed. It was something we'd set up together months ago as a fun project. He used to post silly interviews with classmates or talk about video games. Now he wanted to use it to tell the truth. At first, I hesitated. I was worried it would bring more attention than we were ready for. But then I thought about all the nights I had stayed silent. I thought about how many times I had accepted being treated like I didn't matter. Milo wasn't just trying to tell the truth. He was trying to give me back something I had lost. My voice. So we sat at the tiny kitchen table, and I helped him write a short intro. He called the episode "What They Said When They Thought No One Was Listening." He posted it that night. By morning, it had been downloaded over 8,000 times. Within 2 days, local news picked it up, then national outlets. My story was suddenly everywhere. The woman whose husband tried to sign her away. The little boy who recorded everything. I expected Bryce to come storming in, furious, trying to control the narrative like he always did. But he didn't. He stayed quiet, probably on the advice of his lawyer. His law firm dropped him within the week. Celia went silent, too. She deleted her social media, stopped answering calls, vanished like a ghost. At the custody hearing, the judge listened to the audio in full. I watched her face. I didn't need her to cry. I just needed her to believe me. And she did. The ruling was immediate. Full custody to me. Supervised visitation denied indefinitely. Outside the courtroom, I sat with Milo on a bench and handed him his microphone. "You saved me," I said. "And now you saved yourself, too." He smiled and tucked it back into his backpack. "It's just a microphone," he said. But it wasn't. It was the moment everything changed. I spent so much of my life believing love was supposed to mean forgiveness, even when it hurt. I believed that silence was strength. But sometimes, strength is saying the thing no one wants to hear. Strength is recording the truth when others are trying to bury it. Bryce tried to end my story without asking me how I wanted it told. But my son made sure the story didn't end. He made sure it was heard. It's been 6 months since the day Milo pressed that microphone into my hand. We live in a different home now. It's smaller, quieter, tucked away near the edge of a lake where we can hear the water at night. Milo has a bedroom filled with sunlight and a desk where he sets up his recording equipment. The first thing he unpacked was that little black microphone. He set it on the shelf and said, "This one's retired. It did its job." He still records. But now his voice is lighter. He talks about books he loves, the ducks outside our window, questions about how stars are made. His stories sound like childhood again, safe, curious, bright. He no longer records to protect. Now he records to imagine. As for me, I'm rebuilding. Not just my health, but my sense of self. I used to wake up wondering how I could make others more comfortable. I walked on eggshells around people who made me feel small, who wanted me to be grateful just for being tolerated. That part of me is gone. Now I wake up and make breakfast while Milo reads trivia off the back of cereal boxes. We laugh more. We talk more. There's still grief, still shock at what happened, but there's also something steady underneath it all. Peace. I finalized the divorce 2 months ago. Bryce didn't fight it. He issued a short apology through his lawyer, claiming he deeply regretted the decisions made under stress. I read it once and threw it away. I don't need his version of the story anymore. I have my own. I lived it. Celia never reached out. Not to me, not to Milo. Her absence says more than her presence ever did. That door is closed. The podcast episode Milo posted stayed online. It's been downloaded over 600,000 times. People write in from everywhere, strangers, mothers, even doctors, sharing their own stories of betrayal, survival, and quiet strength. Some say they never knew how to name what was happening to them until they heard ours. That's what I've come to understand. Telling the truth doesn't just set you free, it makes space for other people to do the same. My story isn't rare. It's just usually kept behind closed doors. I used to believe silence kept things stable. What I learned is that silence protects the wrong people. What Milo did wasn't just brave. It was an act of love. A small boy heard something terrible and made a choice. He didn't run. He didn't freeze. He recorded it. And when the time came, he gave that truth back to me. Not out of fear, but because he believed I deserved to know. Because he believed I deserved to live. There is no medal for that kind of love, but there should be. If you're listening to this story and wondering whether to speak up, whether to trust your instincts, whether to believe your own worth, the answer is yes. You do not owe your silence to anyone who treats your life like a convenience. You don't have to wait until someone betrays you to prove your strength. You don't have to become someone's victim to earn your voice. You already have it. I almost died because people who claimed to love me chose control over compassion, but I survived because my son chose truth over fear. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not about getting even. It's about reclaiming the right to exist fully, to be loved without conditions, to be believed without begging. Milo still asks if I'll ever go back to teaching. Maybe I will. But right now, I'm learning too. I'm learning how to live without apology. I'm learning how to protect my peace the way he protected me. This chapter didn't start the way I wanted, but I get to choose how it ends. And this time, I'm writing it myself. If this story moved you, or if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, know that you're not alone. And know this: you are never too far gone to reclaim your voice, your power, or your future. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but it was necessary. For me, for Milo, and maybe for someone out there who needed to hear it. If this meant something to you, please like the video so others can find it. Share it with someone who might need courage. Comment below. I read everyone. And if you want more real stories that speak truth and strength, subscribe to the channel. Your voice matters here. Until next time, take care of your story. You never know